Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Atlantic Fellows for Social and Economic Equity information webinar. We're still admitting people into the space, so I'll just wait a couple of seconds, and it says a few more people are joining us. And we'll begin because we have an hour to get through quite a lot of information. So we're delighted that you could join us. And this webinar is intended to give you a sense of what the AFSEE program is about, what it isn't and what it is, and how we view kind of the approach to this fellowship. So I will make some introductions of my co-panelists, and then my colleagues and I will give you an overview to the program and to the application process, and then we'll have time and space for questions. So just a bit of housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to our website. If you have questions, please put them in the chat panel, and one of our team will share that with us, and we will strive to answer all of the questions, or as many of the questions as we can, and in this time. It would be great if you could include your name and where you are based with your question. And as I said, we'll respond to as many as we can in the Q&A. So I'm Armina Ishkanian. I'm the Executive Director of the AFSEE program. I'm also an Associate Professor in Social Policy, and I'm the co-convener of the Politics of Inequality research stream based at the International Inequalities Institute. I work together with my colleagues here, and I'll ask everyone to please say a few words of who they are. So I work closely with Sarah. So over to you, Sarah.
Hi, so I'm Sarah Camacho Felix, and I'm the Assistant Professorial Lecturer on the program, which is sort of a fancy way of just saying that I'm an education-focused academic, and my area of work is sort of the pedagogy behind the program, so how we go about creating community and learning together.
Thanks, Sarah. Katie.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Bolton. I am the program manager at AFSEE. I oversee a lot of our operational and administration here, and I also run the application and selection process.
Thanks, Katie. And together we're joined with two fellows. So Maureen, if you could briefly introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Excited to be here. My name is Maureen Sagauke. I am from the third cohort of the program, but I was within the non-residential stream from 2018 to 2019.
Thanks, Maureen. And you'll hear
I'm originally from Zimbabwe. Yeah, I'm joining you guys from Zimbabwe, Southern African country.
Great. And then Hobeth, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm Obed Martinez. I was one of the residential fellows in the last cohort, 2019-2020. I'm very pleased to be here with you. I'm in Bogota, Colombia, and I'm looking forward to sharing with you this space.
Great. Thank you so much to everyone. So let's get started. Now, the Atlantic Fellows for Social and Economic Equity program has been around since 2017, and this year we welcomed our fourth cohort. And we're now, as you know, running the outreach and application process for our fifth cohort of fellows, which will start in September 2021. As a program, we believe that inequality is not inevitable and that we can create a better, more equitable world if we work together, if we share our ideas, think through bold and imaginative responses, and also work through a values-led approach. The AFSEE values include fairness, commitment, curiosity, kindness, and courage. And we try to build that throughout the fellowship year. And our ultimate purpose as a program is to support fellows, not just in the fellowship year, but throughout. We believe in lifelong engagement, and I'll say more about that a little later. But if becoming an Atlantic Fellow means you join a lifelong community, both of the AFSEE program, but also of the wider Atlantic family, which includes 6 other programs across the globe. The AFSEE program is based at the LSE, located within the International Inequalities Institute. Every year, we seek to admit 9 residential and non-residential fellows. Residential fellows in a year which didn't have COVID would have moved to London to undertake the Masters in Inequalities and Social Science, which is based in the Department of Sociology. And alongside doing the Master's program, they would take part in the 4 AFSEE modules. This year, a few of our fellows have moved to London, but some are still in their home countries and doing the Masters remotely, which we realize is not probably the ideal situation, but this is where we are this year. Non-residential fellows do not move to London, but they attend the 4 AFSEE modules. And again, this would mean coming to London to undertake the modules. But this year, because of COVID, we've had so far 2 modules that have been online. Now we have 4 modules, 3 of which are held in London in normal circumstances, and the 4th is held in the University of Cape Town, which is our learning partner. So I'm going to go to one more slide and to let you know about our approach and objectives a little bit more before handing it over to my colleague Sarah. So at AFSEE, we see ourselves as a platform, as a space within the wider university of LSE that brings together cutting-edge academic research on inequalities, innovative and critical education models and pedagogy with practice. We seek to create dialogue among a range of different stakeholders. So our fellows include activists, academics, practitioners, policymakers, but also journalists and artists. So we have a lot of different kinds of people who join our program, and they learn from one another and we learn from them as well. And we work together with our colleagues in the International Inequalities Institute, the wider LSE, partner institutions such as the University of Cape Town, and across the Atlantic Fellowship Network to make AFSEE an innovative and strong program. Sarah, over to you.
All right. Well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge I'm having fun seeing where everybody's from in the chat. So it looks like we've got a great international group. All right, so what we have here is basically our educational vision, how we at AFSEE attempt to create an educational sort of space. So the first area is we draw on the LSE and the International Inequalities Institute for a research-rich environment, drawing on sort of the latest research and knowledge that's out there on inequalities, their origins, how they're manifest, the different varieties, all of that stuff. And we also expect fellows to engage in their own inquiry-based investigations, whether that's the practice-based projects that non-residential fellows will do, or if it's the dissertations that residential fellows will do as part of their master's program. Alongside that, we also draw on fellows' knowledge and expertise of activism, policy, and government to create this sort of sense of global solidarity and collective knowledge, so that practical knowledge, knowledge of what's happening on the ground, speaks to and with the research-rich environment. And the aim in that is sort of our third sort of part of the fidget spinner there is a dialogic pedagogy, where it is about bringing all these voices together to talk to and with each other, both among researchers, among practitioners, across those divides, and then across also geographic divides. Next slide. So our learning approach is very much about having a structural analysis of global inequalities and examining the way people resist and challenge those inequalities. So we look at things like root causes, system change, intersectionality is a really important part of our program, and narratives. How do we tell these stories and how do we change these stories in order to push through change? We recognize the current challenges and we focus on how to position knowledge and communities for that change. We also look at alternative economic and policy solutions. So we see this in both our first module and our second module, which I'll talk about here in a moment. And then, as Armina has said, we are also values-led and very much about collective leadership. How do we work together to lead change, and in that represent the diverse voices of the communities that we're working for? In terms of actual pieces that are involved in our modules, we have lectures, we have panel debates, we have presentations, we have group work, we have, during the modules, you're going to be introduced to theories and concepts and approaches, but also embedded in that is a lot of practical work and community building. So next slide. So this is what I was alluding to. So these are our 4 modules. So this is the story, if you will, of the fellowship program. So we start off with the origins of social and economic inequalities to understand histories and legacies of inequalities, looking at both the colonial era and then the post-colonial era. We also, take an intersectional approach to understand things as well as analyze power and the role power plays. We consider things like how inequality is measured, and sort of the critique.
Hold up properly.
We also then have, for every module, we look at your professional and leadership skills. So we'll do something with professional skills. So for example, in module 1, this year we looked at building reflexivity as leaders, and what does it mean to think reflexively, and what does it mean to be an ethical leader? In the upcoming module that we're about to have next week, actually, our professional skills will look at fundraising for social change, and what does it mean, and where do you go for funding, and sort of the issues behind that. And we also sort of move further in thinking about leadership, power, and things like that. Our second module also looks at policy. So how can policy create change or exacerbate change? So we do take a critical approach there. Our third module then moves from top down to bottom up. So considering things along the lines of how social movements and civil society push for change. And once again, taking that critical approach about how they can either push for equity or exacerbate current inequalities. And then finally, our fourth module actually takes place in Cape Town. And the idea here is to have to look at Southern perspectives on equity, like what knowledge is coming out of the global South, particularly the African continent, that we can draw on to further understand both what it means to be involved in fighting against inequality and sort of the practices on the ground, as well as the theoretical and conceptual ideas. So I've sort of alluded to this already, so I'm not going to spend too much on this, but there's sort of 4 areas of focus that every module has. So we develop your leadership skills, specifically looking at ethics, reflexivity, and collectivity. We do something called action learning sets, which is a chance where you get to practice your coaching abilities, which is really listening, asking questions, remaining open while helping fellow leaders come up with their own answers. We develop your professional skills. So we do media training, grant applications, blog writing. We have academic content, which I sort of talked about a little bit in the previous slide. And then we always do community building exercises, which right now that we're all sort of online, we're kind of developing together as a cohort what community building means in a Zoom setting. And then one more slide, I believe. There we go. And this is the learning journey. So this is the sort of journey that you go on across the program. So it starts off with module 1. It's a 2-week intensive course, normally in person, 8 hours a day during those 2 weeks. And then from there, you sort of move away, sort of the yellow line represents when you're sort of on your own working on things versus when we're, well, normally physically together. So you move from that into your second module, sort of in between. You have a chance to reflect forward and think about what you want to do during your fellowship year. Begin thinking about, if you're a non-residential fellow, what your project might be. If you're a residential fellow, start thinking about what courses you want to take as part of your master's program. Then we have module 2, which is policy for equity, which I've talked about, which is also part of a credit-bearing module if you're in the master's program. Then there's a big gap between November and April where you still meet up virtually with a small group of fellows, where you come together once again, like I was talking about, practicing those coaching skills. And so you're still meeting up with each other. Meanwhile, residential fellows are really sort of dug deep in their programs, and non-residential fellows are starting to really work on their projects where they have a mentor that's working with them. Then you have the third module, looking at these sort of bottom-up approaches. And then in June, we have our Cape Town module. And that all leads into dissertation and project submissions in August. And that's sort of the whole journey.
Thanks, Sarah. That was great. And sorry, sometimes the slides weren't clicking forward. So this is a map with all the dots representing where our fellows come from. So you can see we are truly global. The yellow dots represent where the Atlantic Fellows programs are, and the blue dots are where our fellows are based. So you can see we've got quite a lot of geographical spread, and we are focused on the global south, but of course, you know, applicants can come from any part of the world as long as they meet the criteria and also can demonstrate a good fit and a clear interest in the program. Why is this not working? Okay. Now our fellows, because we work, unlike some of the other Atlantic Fellows programs that focus on particular kinds of equity, so AFRE, which is based at the University of Columbia University in New York, focuses on racial equity. Our program focuses on social and economic equity, and that's very broadly understood. So we've had fellows working on issues around gender, the care economy, degrowth, health equity, LGBTQ rights, digital rights, the environment, arts, activism, and so forth. So we are very much about being quite inclusive in that sense. But what we are also very, keen on is that the fellows who come together do share in the objectives and in terms of the values of the program. Now, I mentioned earlier that becoming an Atlantic Fellow isn't just for 1 year, but it's about becoming a lifelong fellow. And our lifelong engagement program begins after fellows graduate and submit their dissertation or project, and they're admitted into the senior fellows community. And that lifelong engagement is about extending the impact of your active fellowship and helping you to grow and to continue building on your work during the fellowship and making connections, again, within your program, but across your program as well. So we aim to do this through a number of means. We support senior fellows' professional development by offering annual stipends, which they can spend on personal training or coaching as they choose. We provide access to networks, in terms of the growing global Atlantic community of senior fellows, but also connections to people within the LSE and the International Inequalities Institute. We support continuous learning through knowledge sharing and skills building. So my colleague Asma Akhtar, who is the program manager for lifelong engagement, is thinking constantly of coming up with new training and development courses for our senior fellows community. This could include bespoke courses or wider master classes. So that's something that we're continuing to offer for our senior fellows. And also we support knowledge exchange and impact through funding, for instance, participation of fellows in conferences, or giving fellows funding for them to come up with their own workshops or conferences through our Network Catalyst funding. And in addition, there are regular community building exercises, and we include fellows in our program committee so as to help shape our curriculum and outreach work and so forth. And we also have a senior fellow member on our AFSEE governing board, which is again about bringing fellows' voice front and center in terms of the program. So this is the AFSEE program in terms of lifelong engagement. Now I'm going to turn things over to Katie, who will talk us through our support to fellows.
Thanks, Amina. So as you'll see here, we offer our fellows various support during the fellowship year that they spend with us, not only through our learning modules, which, as we said, are residential, based in London, one in Cape Town. We offer mentoring for fellows to help support their development, project support for fellows, so that they can really start to reflect on, think about, and come up with creative solutions to inequalities. We, as Amina just mentioned, have this community, global community of senior fellows, which once you've successfully completed your fellowship year, you gain entry to. And we also provide family support and connectivity funds to ensure that any fellow is able to fully engage with the program. Our offer for different streams is a little bit different. So as we said, residential fellows move to London. They undertake a full-time master's degree in inequalities and social science at the LSE, for which we pay for the full tuition. We also provide a robust stipend for living expenses, travel and visa reimbursement. We also have sort of further opportunities, for example, an opportunity to apply to a fund to support your dissertation research. And as I mentioned before, kind of community care provisions for fellows with family care responsibilities. For our non-residential fellows, you remain in your home context and kind of fly in, fly out for our series of modules. We provide you with a £500 scholarship to help facilitate this, all of your travel and visa reimbursements. We also offer up to £3,000 of funding for you to develop and deliver your project. And again, this community care provision for fellows with exceptional circumstances. I'm going to move to the next slide, please. So applying, the applications are open, and our deadline is 11:59 p.m. UK time. That's quite important, on the 31st of January 2021. So I encourage you to go on, you can log into the system, you can kind of have a look through the application, get all your stuff together, and if it takes a few weeks, fine, but you can start looking at that from now. All applications must be submitted online via LSE's graduate admissions portal. You'll see the link here. And also, if you go to our AFSEE website, you can find more information there. Common questions. Which stream do I choose? Can I apply to be either a residential or a non-residential fellow? The answer to this is yes, you can. However, the streams are very different. As I mentioned before, one involves completely relocating, undertaking a full-time course of study, and the others is more project focused, but you remain in your home context. So what I would advise is you really think about what both of these streams are like and consider which one is better for you. And often we find more compelling applications from applicants who have a really clear idea of which stream they want to take and why that is the right stream for them. And then how do I begin the application process? All of this information is actually detailed on our website. So what I would recommend is you go to this link, the afsee.atlanticfellows.org, and you'll find all this information, and it sort of walks you through exactly how you can click through to application and what to select. Depending on what you select, there is no application fee to apply to just the Atlantic Fellows program. If you're applying to other master's degrees at LSE's, then yes, you may have to pay an application fee, but if you're applying just to become an Atlantic residential or non-residential fellow, then no, you do not. Next slide. Great. So to give you a little insight into our selection, we're looking for social change leaders committed to understanding and challenging root causes of inequality and who have experience in fighting inequality through a variety of means, be it grassroots, civil service, campaigning, etc. Our applicants are from all regions of the world, especially from Africa, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and Latin America. But we do not exclude people based on their citizenship or where they live. I know that's a question that's come up in the chat. So regardless of which country you are from or live in, you are more than welcome to apply as long as you meet the application criteria. We are especially looking to support people who have not benefited from previous fellowship or comparable opportunities. What this means is that if you've had several scholarships and several fellowships, we're unlikely to look on your application as favorably. That doesn't mean that you will not be awarded a fellowship, but it means that you will need to give us a really good reason for why this fellowship, why now, why you, because we're especially looking to support people who have not had access to these types of opportunities. And our selection process is a panel's assessment of experience, understanding of inequalities, vision, and potential. And then another point here is that residential fellows must meet the admissions requirements of LSE's MSc in Inequality and Social Science. That was another question that's come up in the chat of, you know, if I don't have an undergraduate degree, can I apply to this? Unfortunately, the answer to that is no, because you wouldn't meet the what we call MSc Inequalities and Social Science admissions requirement. If you're unsure, you can go on their website and it's all detailed there for you. Next slide. And then finally, just some tips and tricks for you how to write a strong application. What we're looking for is people who have deep experience, a strong track record in challenging inequalities, and whose life purpose is aligned to the program. We are looking for people for whom this program will be meaningful and transformational, and people who have experience to share and who we can learn from and with. And we are looking for applicants who are keen to join a global community of social change leaders and to come together and commit to learning together during this fellowship year. As Almina mentioned before, you know, pending completion of this fellowship year, you become a senior fellow and you become part of this robust community. So we're looking for people who really want that. In terms of your application, it sounds silly, but genuinely read the question carefully, keep your answers really clear. We're interested in learning about who you are, your experience, why you want to be a fellow, and why this will be transformational for you. Provide examples as you answer questions, you know, highlight your achievements, highlight things you've done, highlight your growth. Please don't assume that your CV or resume will do the talking for you. This is a mistake that people commonly make, and it really doesn't, you know, it does not talk for you. You need to talk for yourself in application. And finally, just a quick one to say, write and save your answers in a Word document or similar, and then copy over to the application. And then if you're having any internet issues, it won't be lost.
Thanks, Katie. Before we open it up to questions and answers, I'd like to invite our senior fellows, Hobeth and then Maureen, to please share some thoughts about your fellowship experience. Hobeth was a residential fellow. So Hobeth, if you could talk about your experience from that perspective of being a residential fellow. Thanks.
Thank you, Hermine. Hi, everyone again. My name is Obed Martinez, as I said it before, but I am aware that some people haven't joined the webinar. So I'm from Colombia, from Bogota. And I want to share, I was asked to share about my experience as a residential fellow. And I want to share at least 3 basic ideas that I came up with thinking on how to talk in this webinar. So the first one is, what was the most important for me in this experience? It's difficult to summarize in a few words in a short period of time the most important things, but I think at least one for me was quite relevant, and it is the kind of the people that you are engaged with. And by the people, I mean not only the people in the master, the staff of the AFSEE program, but also the fellows, the rest of the fellows, both residential and non-residential fellows. For me, I was amazed, and I was really pleased by the quality of the people that were joining the both residential and non-residential streams of the AFSEE experience. For me, it was important because I learned from them, and I had the sense that we could genuinely build community, and that was quite important. You know, there were people from all across the world, and with different backgrounds, with different social activism, with different experiences, and that was important for my own learning, but also I think for the thriving of the community, of the AFSEE community. And also I was amazed by this is not that kind of scholarship where you get some funding for undertake your master or your studies, but this is a kind of experience where you can genuinely have connection with people and feel that you are not alone in the process of doing the master or having, you know, studies abroad. And that was quite important for me. The AFSEE staff is very important also for the experience as a whole, because across the process, you feel that you are not alone again. And this was, for instance, particularly important to me in the process of thinking and writing the dissertation, which is one of the requirements in the master program at LSE. So, for instance, with Armenia and with Sarah, they both know that we had many talks and conversations about my different ideas on the dissertation, and that was quite useful for me to clarify and to ultimately write a successful dissertation. And also the people from the master itself, I think it's quite important not forget that part, because as you are in a master at LSE, I think that there at the school they have they also pay a lot of attention to gather a very different group and people with different backgrounds too, and that makes the experience of the master also very important, and you can also learn from these people. Secondly, I want to share a few thoughts on why I decided to apply to this particular stream of the AFSEE. I was in a moment in my career working as in an NGO, a human rights NGO here in Colombia. I was working on the implementation of the peace agreement between the government and the guerrilla. I was working in land rights with the indigenous and peasants communities, and I have been working more or less like between 3-4 years in all of these topics, and I felt in that moment that I needed sort of step back and reflect a little bit on my experience, on my work experience, on the kind of job that I was doing and the challenges that I was facing back then. And I realized that I had a kind of intuition, and I felt that there was something missing in there. And for me, it was important to step back and reflect theoretically about my work and about the kind of challenges that I was facing back then. And it was important for me to take that time and space, you know, because sometimes when you are working, you are drained in your work, you are working and working, just worry about getting your things done, especially when you are working in very difficult situations and context, as it is a conflict context. So for me, that was like the particular context and the need that I had to, you know, step back and think and reflect from a very different perspective on the kind of issues that I was facing. And I had the sense back then that the master itself was going to give me that space, but also AFSEE and the modules designed by AFSEE will also contribute to that task that I was setting myself. And lastly, I want to share a few thoughts on the master itself, because it's also quite important. And the first thing that I say when people ask me about the master in inequalities and social science at LSE, the first thing that I say is that they should be aware about their expectations. I will recommend you to ask yourself what what are the expectations that you have in regards to this master. And why is this important? Because I think that this master is very good if you want a very broad interdisciplinary understanding of inequalities. But if you want, for instance, if you are an economist and you are looking for a in-depth economic analysis of inequalities, I will say that this is not the kind of masters that you will need. And why so? Because the master is designed in a way that they bring sociological, anthropological, philosophical, historical perspectives into the master, and that offers you a very broad conceptual, empirical, methodological tools to analyze inequalities, instead of giving you in depth into this topic from a singular discipline. And this is quite important because some of my classmates were kind of disappointed because they were looking for more in-depth analysis of inequality, mainly from an economic perspectives. And this is not the kind of master that will give you that kind of experience, that kind of knowledge. And it is important to know that. On top of that, the master, it is important for you that you are considering applying for AFSEE. It is important to have in mind that you will not be only the master students, but you will be also AFSEE. And that's important because, for instance, my first approach to the theoretical analysis of inequality came from the first module, AFSEE first module, and for me that was mind-blowing. From the first module, it changed completely the way that I was approaching this topic, and that was quite important because as a master student, I had not only the experience and the learnings of the master itself, but also the learnings that we were collectively creating and getting through the AFSEE modules. And that's also very rich and important, encouraging, I'd say, for you to have in mind when thinking to apply to this master. I don't know how much time do I have, maybe.
That's it. Yeah, I think, Jobeth, I want to thank you for your contribution. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Maureen, over to you for you to share. Maureen Sigoki was a member of the second cohort of fellows 2018-2019, originally from Zimbabwe and still in Zimbabwe now. I can't see you, Maureen. I hope you're there.
Hello, can you see me now?
Yes, okay.
Okay, so I totally understand why Hobeth could carry on and on and on and on, because this program is so rich and there's so many exciting facets of learning that I also feel like we can do 24 hours and continue talking if the applicants are ready. But anyway, I'm going to try to do this in 5 minutes. So as Amin rightly said in the introduction, I was part of the second cohort of the program, and I was a non-residential fellow. And so being a non-residential fellow means that I had a practice focus when it comes to trying to understand the interdisciplinary and broad understanding of inequalities. So what it meant, as Amin and the rest of the team have already talked about, is that I would fly in for various modules to London and then join the rest of the master's program and talk about inequalities, and not just talk about inequalities, but also improve or enhance our professional activism practice skills, so to say. So yeah, it was the difference between the residential track and the non-residential track is that you have a practice, more of a practice inclination than you do to the academic approach when you are in the residential fellow. So yes, my choice of the reason why I applied as a non-residential fellow is that I was at a point where, as a labor activist, I'd realized that there's interrelatedness of inequalities. So whilst someone can experience inequalities within the world of work, there's a correlation to gender, racial inequalities, and therefore the broad subject of inequalities became something that intrigued me and would have made me apply for the non-residential fellow. But I was also at a point professionally where I was engaging in a number of projects which I could not interrupt, both at a career level or a professional level, but also at an activism level. and this project could not take me being away from Zimbabwe for like a year or two. So I had to then choose to be the non-residential fellow. And I think part of the motivating factor to being a residential fellow was the profile of people that I saw who had successfully made up the first cohort. So I was at a point where I needed to be challenged, you know, where I needed to be challenged geographically to say what is happening in Armenia, what is happening in the United States of America. And I also wanted to push myself in terms of the caliber of the practitioners that I was going to engage with. And when I looked at the profile, they were very intimidating, but very exciting in that I knew that I was in a place where I would be challenged to be better, challenged to learn more and be better in my activism. So yes, that's the residential fellow. It was challenging. It was challenging. It turned out to be very challenging. The commute in between my country and London also became physically exhausting. But I must say the community that was formed through the help and facilitation of the team made it such that you could be cared for and you could actually feel like you are in a community, which turned out to be a family, in fact, that cares for you. So it's been, oh my God, I can't believe it's been 2-3 years now since I last was in London. Oh my God, it's such a long time. But a lot of things have happened and I've graduated to be a senior fellow. And as a senior fellow, and I'm now part of the lifelong engagement, and I'm part of the community of more than 500 fellows from 7 different other fellowships that are run under the Atlantic banner. And I think that platform offers a continuation of personal development, of leadership skills enhancement. And what I love about this community, again, is that it is very challenging. You find that the profiles of people that are there are profiles that have really a strong background in terms of their work and the activism that they've been doing in their respective spaces. And as such, there's that continuous push for you to be better, for you to bring yourself in the space, for you to learn as well, you know. And what I like about the lifelong engagement as a senior fellow is that there are resources that are available. So through the various grants that are available, for instance, have already received coaching from a person who I thought would help me direct me in the new strategic focus that I was taking. By the way, I applied as a labor activist, but because of the crisis that is happening at home and unemployment and deindustrialization, I've since lost my formal job and now find myself freelancing as a consultant. And what I love about the whole program, residential and non-residential, is that it is very reflective and very agile to changes. So I've changed from a labor activist and now just become a community leader, and the community continues to be relevant. I'm now dealing, for instance, with educational inequalities through the COVID pandemic, and I think there should be a link of some of the work that we've been doing, but the community continues to be relevant. The community continues to be useful in the different trajectory that I've already taken from the time that I've applied. The lifelong engagement continues also to enhance your leadership skills through the various leadership or training programs that are available. So for instance, just a couple of hours ago, facilitated by the Atlantic Institute, but of course, the AFSEE team would also know about it. I was in a fundraising webinar where we were talking about how do you resource your idea, how do you resource your project and all of that. And these are very relevant skills that you constantly need to upgrade when you're a practitioner and you're a community leader, as I am. So I love the fact that as a lifelong senior fellow, I continue to learn, but at the same time, I also have resources available to me through this wide range of a community. And the last thing that I love about being the senior fellow is that I then get to communicate. Whereas in my class, it was just about 20 people, 17. I now have resources to a network of about 500 people from across different 7 fellowships that Amin alluded to earlier. I now have a friend from who has a focus on brain health. I've got a brain equity. I have a friend from social equity program. I have a friend from racial equity. And that broadens your worldview. And with a broadened worldview, I think the natural impact is that you can only improve on your activism and your impact as a leader. So it's been a very worthwhile experience, an experience that continues to enrich you. And I love the fact that I'm part of this for as long as I live, you know. So the lifelong engagement becomes something that I'm always looking for. But one thing that I think Hobart and some people have not really spoken about is how community then transcends and becomes family. I would tell you that within this network becomes, readily have people that you can get care from, you know, because one thing that I'm always big about is who cares for the carer. And one thing the fellowship is very sensitive to is to provide care, resources for care. So you find that as much as our work can be emotionally and mentally taxing, there's always platforms and resources availed to making sure that you're also cared for, because a cared for leader therefore then can impact their community effectively. It's amazing. I feel cared for. I know that I have a place that I can run to. I have a network of people that I can always call on when I need a hug, a virtual hug, thanks to COVID, and a virtual cheerleading, you know, to say that I can continue to do this. Yeah, and the diversity is, yeah, amazing. And then it also demands cultural sensitivity. It also demands that you bring yourself into the space and you have the responsibility to say, look here, this is where I'm coming from, and these are things that I hold dear when it comes to my cultural identity. But over and above everything, the team makes it such that they are very sensitive in their programming, that you don't need to work so hard in making sure that people understand where you're coming from. So it's been amazing. And I don't think there's an age limit. And in terms of experience, I'm not so sure, but in terms of experience, I felt like as long as you make a case for your experience, then yeah, you have a clear
Thanks
shot.
so much, Maureen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maureen. I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think, yeah, I was just listening to you and thinking, yes, it does become like a family, and that sense of being part of this community. So thank you both to you and to Hobeth for sharing your personal views and your experiences with the program. And I think it's wonderful to hear from you both. I am cognizant that a lot of our the participants on the webinar have been asking questions. So I'm going to start by answering the questions, and I'll take them in groups. And then what I will try to do is also, if I haven't answered anything, you can, come back to us. So as Maureen already said, in terms of the age, we don't have an upper age limit. And it's really about experience. So we are looking for fellows who have at least 7 to 10 years of experience. So we are generally looking for mid-career professionals, not those who are, just out of university or just have a couple of years of experience. We are looking for people who want that space to reflect on the work that they've already done. But there is no upper age limit in terms of applying. And the average, I would say somewhere around 30s, in their 30s. In terms of requirements, references. Now, for the residential track, those are set by the LSE. So you will need to provide one academic reference. If you don't provide one, that will impair your application. So it's very important, if you're applying for the residential track, that you do follow the instructions very carefully. For the non-residential track, you don't have to apply. You don't have to include an academic reference, but for the residential track, you do. And again, to apply for the residential track, because you're being assessed for other students to the master's program, you will need to meet the minimum GPA or other requirements, academic requirements. In only exceptional circumstances can we make a special case, but those are very rarely accepted. So generally at LSE, you do need to have a 3.5 GPA or a 2.1 from the British system in order to get an offer. And so please bear that in mind. And if you do not have transcripts, I'm afraid they will not look at your application. So you will need to pull together all of the required paperwork and submit that in due time in order to be given consideration. In terms of deferring, generally, LSE does not defer, at least this year. In terms of this year, we had very strict rules on deferring, and we will take deferrals on a case-by-case basis. So we don't have a general approach to deferrals because we are building a community. So we take time in selecting the fellows. So we're not looking for people who are going to apply and then go off and do something else. So please apply when you think you have the time and space in your life to make the most of this fellowship. In terms of community building, as my colleague Sarah already mentioned, we are challenged by the current situation to think of different ways of building community. So we've been working online and involving fellows in that process of community building. But if we were doing this in real life, we would, obviously have events, cultural events, arts events, social events, including dinners and receptions and things like that, where people get together. But, we've had events with artists, with poets. We've done walking tours in London, a scavenger hunt in LSE directed on academic issues and so forth. So there's a lot that happens. In terms of, someone had asked about research projects for the residential track. When you're doing your master's, you will be so busy that you will not have time to do additional research. The research that you will be involved in is writing your dissertation. And that's what Hobeth was talking about in terms of his project. And that project was very much focused on his interests, but it was supported by different academics at LSE who supported him along that process. There was a question, and I'll turn to you, Sarah, on this, about what we teach on economic inequalities and projects. In terms of economic inequalities, we focus on a range of inequalities. So we're not solely focused on economic inequalities or wealth inequalities, but we're looking at the intersection of inequalities. We look at it from a historical perspective, thinking around the legacies of colonialism, thinking about the enclosures movement and how that's impacted in terms of property and ownership and inequalities. We talk about how measures and indicators have arisen and the politics of those. And we also talk about the status quo policies that are addressed and put forth to tackle, for instance, inequalities of opportunity and mobility. But also we take a critical approach and we talk about degrowth and alternative models. So it's a very robust approach. And in terms of projects, Sarah, do you want to say a few words about the range of projects?
Sure, yeah. So we've had a huge range of projects. I'm trying to think about the ones that look specifically at economics, because that was the question. So for example, last year we had a fellow who has launched a new podcast series where the aim is actually to amplify feminist economics, specifically from the African continent. So it's a series of interviews with different economists working from a sort of feminist African perspective. And what does that mean? How does that shift what macroeconomics means? And offers alternatives to our current economic systems. This year we have somebody who is thinking about, because they're in the projects of writing their proposals right now, a project where he wants to look at the concept of degrowth as an alternative economic perspective, and how narratives of different laborers across Argentina help sort of feed into how degrowth potentially can speak to those narratives. So it's really bringing in the personal stories with the economic theory, which I really like, which is something that sort of, it's the kind of thing we're looking for. We're not just looking for a piece of research, though that's good, but a piece of research that makes us think in a different way and that speaks to different audiences. So one of the things I always tell non-residential fellows is, who's the audience you're trying to speak to? And that should shape the kind of project you're trying to make. Don't just write a research report. If you're trying to speak to or with particular communities, then you need to design something that is about them and how they communicate. So we've had all sorts of different projects across the board. Most of them sort of aren't purely economic based, but actually work at an intersection in order to suggest policy for policymakers or to tell stories for people who are trying to change the narratives and change the dominant narratives to move away from our current system, which reproduces inequalities.
Thanks, Sarah.
Question.
Yeah, that was great. There's been a few more questions about can people with master's degrees apply? To the non-residential stream, yes. For the residential stream, we would want to see why you want to do a second or third master's, as in some people's cases, and that there needs to be a very good argument and explanation. And if you have benefited from funding scholarships from for your previous masters, again, we want to increase access to help people who have not had those opportunities. So we may not necessarily look favorably on an application from someone who's had 2 or 3 masters that have been fully funded, because we are trying to increase access. In terms of applications, last year we had 419 and we have 17 fellows. So it is quite competitive. And that's why, as my colleague Katie said, you do have to spend time on your application, making a very clear case about why you want to do this fellowship program and how you will benefit from it, but also how will you contribute to it? Because it's a two-way street. What will you bring to the program? Are you willing to be in this space, to be working with other fellows, to create community, to build community, and to think in terms of collective leadership? So those are the questions I have seen. In terms of field work and research, obviously because of COVID, that's been very limited this year, but we do not set limits on what fellows work on in terms of their projects, nor their dissertations. It is entirely up to you what your project or your dissertation will focus on. And for residential fellows, it is very difficult to maintain paid work and to do a full-time master's program. And no, it is not possible to get back to the office after 6 p.m. in the evening. If you want to succeed, you will commit full-time. For non-residential, I will go to Maureen, but for residential, I would say that working full-time is not. And I speak from experience, having been a master's program director for 15 years, I can tell you that if you want to succeed, then you have to commit. Maureen, do you want to say anything about balancing full-time work and studies in a non-residential track?
So my question for Mariana, hi. So before I even get into the specific details, what you just said in terms of commitment, because I think the demands of the full-time work mimic the responsibilities that come with you being a social change agent. So what I loved about this, it's that it was also pushing my boundaries. Understand that if I think I'm going to be an effective change agent, I've got to get used to the fact that my time is not my own. And I wish I'd said it. There's so many things that I need to do, and there's so little time. So I think if we understand the issue of commitment, then we can talk about that. But yes, it's quite difficult and demanding, but it is very doable. I was lucky in my context. I was already working consultant, so what it meant that I could work around my schedule and make sure that it doesn't become too demanding to a point that I cannot bear it. But I know some people in my class who had full-time jobs. But what makes it everything easier is the thoughtfulness of the AFSEE team. They're very clear in terms of scheduling of the modules. So you can know about all program before you even start, and there's such work schedule around the dates. And very rarely were there any reschedules. So that means that you can schedule your time, take vacation or leave days according to that. So it makes it all easier. But then the course in itself being demanding, you bring yourself in the space. This is where we exchange knowledge. So there is, yes, that time where somebody's coming to you and giving you almost like a theoretical and academic understanding of a concept that you're learning. But in most times, because they understand that we are not coming in without anything to share, but we're coming in with a wealth of experience, it also then leads to us being able to share on our context. So it's not so demanding, the non-residential track, when I compare to the residential track, but yeah, at the end of the day, nothing for a leader is not demanding, and it's all about commitment, but it's very doable. And thanks to the AFSEE team for being thoughtful and insightful in their planning and design of the program. It can be scheduled around, and you can make your full-time work and studies quite bearable, but it is demanding. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Maureen. Yeah, I think that is something that people have to bear in mind. And one of the requirements of the program is an active engagement in the modules. So, you know, taking part in that community and making sure you're committing to that. It's not, you know, oh, today I feel like I'll turn up to the module and tomorrow I don't. It doesn't work like that. And that's written in our terms and conditions. And that's why I said, you know, we encourage people to think about, do I have the time and energy and desire to dedicate a year of my life to the active fellowship and to be able to make the most of this opportunity, because it is a wonderful opportunity. But I think, you know, you do have to take into account that it does require the time and a commitment from you. It's not a passive program. It is the expectation is that you will be actively engaged. And to get the most out of it, you do have to actively engage. I've got a couple more questions. One is about health equity. And yes, you can work on projects around health equity, but I also do want to make everyone aware that we do have Atlantic Fellow programs that are much more focused on health equity than we are. So you may want to also investigate those to see if those are perhaps more suitable for your interests. Could I pursue a PhD on inequality in the country alongside the non-residential fellowship? No, because you know, a PhD process is quite demanding. Sarah and I have both gone through it, and we know, and we think that it, you know, doesn't give the time and space in terms of what we were asking for in terms of the program. And so we have had people with PhD candidates apply, and they have not received offers because of that.
But I would add, if you already have a PhD, so you've completed it, then you can apply for the non-residential, just to add that quickly.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, definitely. In terms of experience, as I said, we're looking for people with 7 to 10 years. Enthusiasm is great, but we want people who have experience working on inequalities, working to tackle inequalities. So it is really important what kind of experience as well, right? And that's what you will need to demonstrate in your application, is your commitment to tackling inequalities and the work that you've done. And if you can make a convincing case, then, you know, this is definitely the program for you. And as we said, you know, we have lots of opportunities for fellows in terms of further growth and further development. And a number of our fellows, in fact, have gone on to do PhDs. But I would like to add that we do not fund their PhD programs, but we do give guidance in terms of thinking about doing your PhD and so forth. But unfortunately, the AFSEE program cannot fund PhD work. Are there any more questions? That I haven't answered? Colleagues, have I missed anything?
I'm just doing a quick scan of the questions as well to see what we've missed.
Just quickly, one of you asked about funding. You may have missed it in the presentation, but if you are on the residential stream, the fees for the Masters in Inequality and Social Science is paid for by the program. So we cover that along with the other things I mentioned, so the family care, the stipend, etc. Non-residential fellows do not take this master's degree, they take the series of learning modules, which is an AFSEE short course. We also cover the cost of that for our non-residential fellows, so you don't pay any fees for taking that either.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks, Katie. Yeah. And I think, you know, there is more information on our website that you could look at in terms of the application process and the required paperwork that you will need to submit. It's really important that you start early, because sometimes, you know, references, getting people to write references for you might take a little time. Obtaining your transcripts might take some time from the universities, especially if they're closed. So please be sure to start the process early so that you can bring together all of the required paperwork. And it's really important that you do spend a good amount of time writing your statement, which is a key part of your application, because we do read that, and that is something that's very important to the decision making and selection process in terms of getting to know you better and to understand your motivation of being part of this program, and being again part of the wider Atlantic community as well. So I think I got one more question here. Yeah, and just finally, I think, you know, we are looking for people with around 7 to 10 years of experience. So I think that's it. I think I've answered all the questions. On this slide, you can see further information, our email address, the application deadline. Please, again, as Katie said, bear in mind that the applications do close at 11:59 p.m. on the 31st of January, Greenwich Mean Time, so UK time. You can connect with us on our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And this video, as we said, has been recorded and will be shared. And you can find out more information about the program, about the International Inequalities Institute on our web pages. And we'll be very happy to see one more question. I think it's Lawrence. There was someone who had raised their hand.
Yeah, hello, and thank you very much for the insightful information. Well, I just had a question. I posted in the chat box, but I guess it has been missed. My question is around, what if one lost the contact with the previous university because of the experiences of transphobia in the space? Are there any other alternatives that one can use other people that they work with, maybe as points of references?
For the residential application, you would need an academic reference from someone who's taught you in an academic setting, who can speak about your abilities as a student. This is, again, not something that we have, you know, it's not one of our requirements, but it's a requirement from the university. And unfortunately, that's not something we can change. Before we end this, I want to ask my fellow panelists, Hobeth, Maureen, Katie, and Sarah, if there's anything you want to add or just say goodbye.
Yeah, hi everyone again. Just to say that we do have an FAQs page on our website, which answers a lot of these questions and more. So I really encourage you, if you have questions remaining, or perhaps you missed a bit of this, or there's something else that you've thought of since then, please go onto our website, please carefully read our FAQs, and I think you'll find a lot of answers to things there. Once you've done that, if you have really specific questions, please email us. You'll see our email address here. It's afsee@lse.ac.uk. And we will be happy to answer any sort of more specific questions. Just to note on that, we will not be able to individually review CVs or applications. So please don't send those through to us, because we won't be able to look at them for you. But yes, if you do have other questions, like I said, FAQs first, then email us. Thanks.
I would just say it was nice to meet everybody through the chat. I do encourage you to, look through, the FAQs like Katie said, and if you do meet the requirements, go ahead and apply. If you're not sure if you meet the requirements, I know there are several people who are sort of building their experience. We're not going anywhere. So if you don't meet our requirements yet in terms of years of experience, apply in 2 to 3 years. We hopefully will still be around. There's no reason we wouldn't. It'd be great. I look forward to reading all the applications when they come in.
Thanks, Sarah. We will be around. Hopefully. Maureen and Hobeth, over to you if you want to say anything.
Yeah, so COVID has really exposed us the fact that the world as we know it is not a whole big giant of silos, but everything is just interrelated, and it's a whole range of intersectionalities. And as we are all grappling with inequalities of all shapes and forms, and it's a scourge that we're all grappling with globally, it is the AFSEE program, therefore, offers a unique platform for you to be able to understand the broad nature of inequality, and because it is only through the understanding of the holistic view of inequality and how everything is related that you can be a better researcher, a better academic, a better practitioner. So for anyone who's either an academic, I think, or someone who's a practitioner, I would tell you that AFSEE is unique in that it brings together academics and practitioners together, and it's very rare to find this mix in one space. And the future of the world as we see it is based on collaborative leadership, and we need academics and practitioners to come too and then reinforce each other for sustainable solutions. And I think this is what change agents really do. Let's collaborate over action and positive impact. Yeah. So apply, and join us in the network of community and family that we call the community lifelong fellowship engagement. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Maureen. Thank you. Hobeth,
Final
word over.
I am 100% with Maureen, and I just wanted to acknowledge how touched I was by Maureen interventions, and this is exactly the kind of experience that you can have as a fellow. This is the kind of inspiring words that you can always have when we are part in these communities, even if you are far away from each other. This is the kind of sense of community that you can build through AFSEE, and that's why I also wanted to invite you all to apply and join us in this experience and in this beautiful global community. Thank you all.
Thank you. So we've now reached the end of this webinar. I want to thank every one of the panelists again for your important contributions and sharing your insights and information. I would like to thank the organizers, Karen and Asma, who have been working hard in the background. And most of all, thank you to the participants for being here with us, sending us your questions, and please do apply. And we look forward to working with you, hopefully in the future. So bye, everyone.